All right. Welcome back to United Astronomy Clubs of New Jersey. Thank you again for joining us here in our online only winter presentations. As always, I do encourage you guys to do check out our website, uacnj.org. It's where you're going to find a list of all our upcoming talks and events, as well as any other special programs that we might be able to offer. Since we are a volunteer based organization, a 501c3, we do occasionally run into problems where we don't always have the volunteers, but we do try our very best to make things happen for you guys. Uh, with that being said, you can also check out our social media pages, our Facebook, our Instagram. We got a Discord server where you can ask questions, share your pictures. We always love to see them. And as well as we will post when we are having special events through our Facebook as well. With that, our speaker tonight is Cliff. Blah, 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 blah. Sometimes you need to remember not to talk so fast that your eyes get wrapped around your eye teeth and you can't see where you're speaking. Clif Ashcraft is giving our talk tonight on his observatories. Cliff is a retired chemist who specialized in organic and polymer synthesis. He earned a PhD from Berkeley and a Bachelor of Science from the University of Cincinnati. He enjoys singing tenor with Philomusica, building telescopes, taking planetary images with a webcam, double star observation, and hang out with his observatory guard dog. Cliff has served on the research committee of Amateur Astronomers Incorporated and enjoys making presentations on a variety of astronomy topics. And with that, here's Cliff.
Howdy, folks. Tonight I'm going to talk about an ongoing construction project that's been happening in my backyard over the past 25 years or so that has culminated in three little shacks that I call my observatories. Now, why did I want an observatory in the first place? Well, I needed a secure place to keep my telescopes. I wanted to minimize the time it took to set up my telescopes for observing and maximize my observing time. And I wanted to reduce the activation barrier that gets in the way of doing more observation and make it easier to do astrophotography without a big long setup time ahead of it. Well, what kind of observatory was I going to make? Well, it was pretty clear I was not going to have a dome. They're expensive to buy, difficult to build, and they are prone to dome currents. Roll-off roof, well, that's possible. Needs a structure to hold the roof when it's rolled off. Lots of mechanical stuff involved, rollers, rails, etc. However, lots of amateurs have done it this way and made roll-off roofs like the ones we have up at Jetty Jump. Well, how about a fold-off roof? It seems simpler. I only need a hinge or some other kind of rotary joint to fold the roof on and off. Can be made waterproof with good overlap design at the peak. It might be hard to open unless you have a counterpoise, but it's not a commonly used design. What in the world am I missing if I try to do this? Well, observatory number one, I decided to try a fold-off roof design. It had an 8-foot by 6-foot floor plan, not very big, but it did have a carpeted floor raised off the ground. The wall was only 4 feet high from the floor up to the roof eaves, and it was to have a pier for my 10-inch Meade Schmidt Cassegrain that was mechanically isolated from the building. The roof sections were made from a single sheet of 4x8 exterior plywood, light enough maybe not to need a counterpoise. Well, here's the plans I came up with. Here's a 3-view drawing of it, a side view from the east, a top view, and a view from the north, conveniently transparent so you can see the telescope inside and where the observer would sit. There's room to get behind the telescope and room to sit in front of it on a chair and observe. And it was to be a pole barn, no foundation. built on posts that are just sitting in the dirt in the ground. And the reason I did this was because I had heard that if you're on a rural property that's occasionally used for farm purposes, you didn't really need a building permit to build a pole barn. I don't know if that's really true or not, but so far I've gotten away with it. Um, this is a drawing I made in 1998 when I started the project. Oh, and by the way, that funny looking block on the right, a friend of mine in Australia uh, duplicated my observatory in the Melbourne area, and he didn't want to make it on posts in the ground like I did. And that's a funny kind of concrete block that he set the thing on. So you don't have to make it a pole barn. Anyhow, you can see the pier is four screwed and glued and pressure treated 4x4s embedded directly in concrete, wood and concrete. Well, here's how I started to do it. I made a frame out of 4x4s and 2x4s, and I made liberal use of galvanized sheet metal brackets to hold it together, and I covered it with 1/2-inch plywood as shown here. Everything was held together with drive screws and those galvanized steel brackets. And I have lots of holes in the ground. I have 4 8-foot diameter post holes and one 12-inch diameter post hole in the middle, all of them about 3 feet deep. Here's my 4 glued together 4x4s stuck in the hole in the ground. I held it together with both liquid nails and timber lock screws, and it's been there for over 25 years now, and it seems to still be just as solid as it ever was. I filled up the hole with concrete after I had propped it in place and plumbed it. Then I have the sections that I built on the ground dropped into those holes, and I just filled them up with dirt after I added some cross beams and some temporary braces and got it all leveled. Tamped the dirt down and removed the braces, and I framed around the pier and added some floor joists. Installed a plywood floor, again held down with drive screws, and I attached the sides, again 1/2-inch thick pieces of regular plywood. I framed the roof in place, not attached, and you notice that I have ears sticking out to the side. The cross pieces by both the door and the back of the structure extend outside of the frame of the observatory. And the purpose of those is to have hinge pins that allow the roof structure to tip on and off from overlapping in the center. Here's the roof added with an overhang to keep the rain out. Inside, I just have a couple of screw eyelets that I jam a stick through to lock it so the wind can't blow it open. And here's what it looks like from the outside. I completed that in August of 2001. And there's my German Shepherd, Noah, who's very happy with the structure. Inside, you can see the pier sticking up through the floor, not touching the floor at any point, with my 10-inch Meade Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope and a nice comfy chair my son bought for me. Here's another view inside it. And I can store my other telescopes inside it, so they're out of the rain. But that gets a little bit crowded for a while, particularly getting this long tube telescope I call a Barlow Newt. It's an f6 10-inch Newtonium, but I have a Barlow lens mounted right on the crosshairs pointed down at the mirror. And so it's effectively an f18 Newtonium in a tube for a F6 Newtonian. But anyhow, these were occupying a lot of room inside, and of course I had to take them out every time I wanted to observe, so I would have room to move around. I really need a permanent observatory for that 10-inch. I wanted to mount it equatorially on a Losmandy G11 mounting, but permanently, not something I have to schlep around. The existing observatory designed around the Meade LX50 was not suitable for the larger scope on the G11. It was time to build yet another observatory. I was happy with the way the fold-off roof design worked, and so I decided it was going to be another fold-off design. Back to the drawing board, McDraw Pro again. Here's a above plan view of the foundation. It's going to be about 12 feet by 8 feet, and I'm going to have a steel pier in the middle this time and a 16-inch hole, and 4 8-inch post holes around the corners. It's going to be another pole barn. That worked out just fine. The termites don't eat it if it's made out of pressure-treated wood. Here is the view from above with the frame for the floor and the cross pieces that are going to support the fold-off roof in place. And you notice I framed around the pier, so it's not going to be touching the pier. Here it is with the floor added and showing the location where the Losmandy mount is going to go, with some room for some file cabinets. Got to put my Sky telescope somewhere. There's not room for them at the house anymore. And here is the view down showing the roof frame. By the way, the rafters are basically just 1x2s. It's not a very heavy built structure. I don't want it so heavy that I can't lift the thing off. Here it is with the roof panels added on top of it. Here's the view from the south, showing the frame structure, and it's pretty rigid. I put lots of triangles in it. That truss on the bottom has a floor on the bottom level of it and another floor on top. I've got storage space in between. Here it is with the plywood attached and the door and steps going up to it. And you can see the view showing how the roof folds off. I decided to put a counterpoise on this because these roof panels are a good deal heavier than the panels for my first observatory. Here's a side view showing the framing structure. Again, I like triangles. Here shows the telescope mounted, and I discovered that the polar scope for the Losmandy mounting it needs to look through the north wall of the observatory, so I have a removable panel up there so you can see through it when you need to align it. But the alignment has been very stable. Not had to redo that. And here it is showing the counterpoise system, which is made from a garage door spring, very heavy duty thing, and a pulley arrangement giving me a mechanical advantage of a factor of 2, and it's pulling against the big screw eyelets at the end of a lever that's attached to the roof. And the way it works is that the spring is stretched when the roof is folded off, and it's released when it comes back on. So it actually balances a lot of the weight of the roof structure. Without that, I would need a couple of strong folks to help me lift the roof on. Construction. There we're looking at the south end of my first observatory, and I've got the pier in place, and I've got the concrete in the ground already at this point. And I've got the 4 corner post holes dug. Those cinder blocks are sitting over the holes so I don't trip and break my leg. Here's the north and south ends of the observatory framed out on the ground. I used the same kind of technique as I did for the first observatory. A lot of use of those galvanized steel brackets that you can buy at Home Depot or any building supply. And I use drive screws rather than nails. Here's the view from the side. I borrowed my neighbor who helped me lift those things up and drop them into holes. And before adding any dirt, I added the longitudinal frame members, which are pressure treated 4x4s, put them on brackets and screwed them into place. And I put temporary diagonal braces that I could loosen up as I leveled the whole structure. And you can see that if we zoom into the level, this is a structure that's on the level. Here's the view from the south after I have covered the frame with plywood. A view from the northeast showing that I've added the subfloor that's going to be the floor of my storage space. I haven't added the main floor yet. Another view from the south. And here I have added the main floor. This is the one that's going to get a layer of outdoor carpeting. You don't want to drop eyepieces on a wooden floor, or particularly not a concrete floor. Glad I don't have that, but it makes it easy to keep clean. Works out great. You can see the hole I have for the polar axis scope to look through until I get the thing lined up. I then attach the plywood sides. Here is a view from the inside showing the pier sticking up through the floor. A view of the southwest corner. I haven't added the stairs yet. At this point, I spray painted the whole structure inside and out with white primer paint. It's still got concrete blocks as temporary steps there. But I couldn't wait. I don't even have the roof built yet, but I had to install the mounting in the telescope and get some looks at the sky from a kind of almost permanent position. Of course, I had to put it away or outside that evening. Then I got busy with the framing. I have a sturdy 2x4 on the ends of the rafters sticking out past the pivot point where the folding is going to happen. Here it is with all of the rafters added. What I did on this one is that 2 of the rafters are 2x3s and the rest of them are 1x2s. And that's the framing. And you can see on the corners of the observatory, I've got 1/2-inch carriage bolts stuck through those ears that are stuck out of the side of the structure. That's the pivot point of the roof structure. And you can see that I've made it overlap. The west side of the roof overlaps the east side, and there's an overhang to prevent rain from getting through the crack. I then glued and screwed 5mm mahogany plywood to the roof frame. This turned out later to be a mistake, but a buddy of mine, he was really extolling the waterproof characteristics of marine mahogany plywood. And maybe some marine mahogany plywood is waterproof, but the stuff that I managed to buy from a building supply wasn't. I had to fix that later, but I'll get to that in a bit. But this is the structure that I built at first. I also went and painted the roof with white primer, didn't paint it on the inside. Here's the view from the east. There's how the counterpoise system works. You can see my garage door spring going back into the darkness there, and you can see uh, my cable attached to a solid anchor point on the corner of the observatory, going back through a pulley at the end of the spring, and then through another pulley and up to the screw of the eye bolt that's uh, epoxied into the end of that 2x4. There's an identical structure on the other end and on both ends on the other side of the observatory. So there's two garage door springs, and that really made it easy to open and close. Here's another view of the corner that you can see the details a little bit better, and a side view of the garage door spring. I've never seen a garage door spring used like this, but it works extremely well. More details of the fiddly bits. Those pulleys and were things I was just able to buy at hardware stores. Here's a view of the inside. To get a little bit more help, I have added a bit of rigging to the inside. This gave me another mechanical advantage on lifting the heavy thing up. This gave me another mechanical advantage of two, and really made it easy to lift it. I later added another set of double pulleys, and I ended up with another doubling of mechanical advantage. I'm getting weaker as I get older, so I need more mechanical advantage. And here it is, opened up and safely supported for the first time. By this time, I had graduated to a 12.5-inch reflector in that square tube structure. That's the one I did all my double star work with using measuring CCD camera images with. There it is. It's practically self-supporting in that position. You have to pull it to get it to close or to get it to fully open. So it wants to open up like that. Here it is closing. I have even less hair than that now. The inside, the roof is held closed using two suitcase clamps, a little more sophisticated than the stick and two eye bolts that I used for the first observatory. But you got to make some technical progress. Here it is the first winter, and it holds the snow just fine. I did eventually put some steps up there and to replace the cinder blocks. To the left, which is the west, is my back field that I let my neighbor use for her horses. They seem to like the company of astronomers. They hang out near the observatories. Here's the inside when I still had the 10-inch Barlow Newt in there, and some of the equipment that I used to photograph the Mars opposition of 2003 by the so-called lucky imaging technique, which I will complain about later. But that's a 2U webcam, one of the very first things that us planetary imagers use for high-resolution images of the planets. And I'm working at a focal ratio of about f55 to get proper Nyquist sampling with this one-shot color camera that I have to debayer. You lose 50% of your resolution when you debayer. So you have to get the color back, and you can compensate by using a long focal ratio. By the way, here are some of the images I got for my webcam photography of the Mars opposition of 2003. And I was pretty happy with these. You can see an awful lot of details on the surface of Mars. I did better later, but it was a lot of fun. Here's probably the best seeing that I ever got with the 10-inch. This is some a double transit and shadow passage over Jupiter by Europa and Ganymede. And if you look at the little uh, 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 pictures down at the bottom were cropped out of those images, you can actually see some detail on the surface of Ganymede. That brighter spot is the high albedo region called Osiris on the side of Ganymede that always is facing away from Jupiter. Progress has been made at Prineville Observatory in the last few years. As I said before, I upgraded the main scope from a 10-inch to a 12.5. I put a much bigger computer in the observatory. I got the big ST8 camera, which I used for my double star work, and I added an office by roofing over the space between the first and second observatories and taking a chainsaw to the north wall of the new observatory. You can see my little office in place there. It provides a convenient place to have a computer that's the light is shielded from the area around the telescope. Here's the 12.5-inch after I rebuilt the upper end of the tube with a Serurier truss telescope. And I added another little reflecting telescope as a high magnification finder, which is very useful for locating the tiny field of view that I need to get in the camera when I'm doing planetary imaging. I installed that 12.5-inch f6 in 2005, a couple of years after I did the Mars opposition with the 10-inch f6. In the far wall, you can see some black duvet cloth curtains that keep the light of my computer out of the observatory space. Here's what's in the observatory right now. This is the C14 that used to be AAI's main instrument at the Barry Malpass Observatory at Jenny Jump. They replaced that with a C14 Edge back in 2016, and I bought the regular C14 from them and installed it here. This turns out to be a great telescope for imaging galaxies, and I've got another talk based on my exploration of the local supercluster using this telescope. Here's a view inside the office. My friend calls it a cockpit. I sort of have to get down into it, like climbing into the cockpit of an old style biplane. However, in 2005, I began construction of a 7.25-inch Schuppmann medial. Now, this telescope I took up to Stellafane to show along with a group of other Schuppmann telescopes. This is more Schuppmann telescopes than have ever been displayed together at one time in all of history. These are my buddies in the Schuppmann Club. But you can see that's a pretty good sized telescope, at least as far as length is concerned. And I'm obviously going to need yet another observatory if I'm going to mount this permanently. I definitely do not want to be schlepping this out of my basement and into my backyard every time I want to use it. This was in 2007 after I had finished building it. I didn't make the optics, by the way. My friend Jim Daly, who's the third guy from the left, he made the optics back in, I think, around 1980 or so, and replaced it with a 9-inch Schuppmann. And the optics were just put in a box on the shelf and were languishing. So I bought the optics from him in 2005. He only charged me what he paid for the glass. And of course, Jim Daly's optics are worth a whole lot more than that. It's a beautiful job he did on the optics. The optics consist of a simple lens objective, that's the blue thing on the left, and a field mirror on the extreme right that's adjusted with some of the little fiddly bits down there to position it accurately. And in the middle on the top is a Mangan mirror, also a simple lens with a mirror on the back. This is not a crown flint pear thing. It's only crown glass, but it achieves perfect achromatism by playing off the negative refraction of the Mangan against the positive refraction of the objective. And it makes a splendid planetary instrument. This sucker is 10 feet long, and I'm going to need a bigger boat. Well, here's what I came up with. I used Google SketchUp to make a complete 3D drawing of the structure. It's going to be another pole barn. Those poles in the corners are 10 feet long, and they go about 4 feet down in the ground. There's a central pier there, but as I first built it, it's just resting on posts, that three big 8x8 posts that go in the ground. And there's the shipman in the middle, mounted on an old Meade Starmaster telescope mount. That's what I took it. I had it on when I took it up to Stellafane. Here's framing the structure. You see it's going north of my original observatory. It's a 12-foot square floor, and those posts go only 6 feet high, which leads to some head bagging, but I'm starting to wear a hat every time I go in the observatory because I've lost my sonar devices on the top of my head now that I'm mostly bald. Here the roof is framed and it's rolled off onto the support structure. And by the way, my rollers are 4 6-inch diameter V-groove pulleys mounted on some welded together structures that have ball bearings on them. And you can see my truss structure there is designed to give me as much headroom as possible. The things on the lower part of the truss are 3/4 inch steel conduit like you use for electrical wiring, and they're tensile elements. And the 2x4s and 2x3 structures on the top part of the truss are compression structures, and it's all kept from flipping out of square by those turnbuckles and cables. It's a very light structure, and I covered it with 32 mil aluminum sheet with a vinyl coating on it. By the way, that's what I eventually had to cover the mahogany plywood on observatory number 2 with. That mahogany that I got just was not waterproof. But I learned about that the availability of that aluminum sheet when I was building observatory number 3. And you can see that I have now coated observatory number 2, which you see on the left side of the slide, with that same material, which is a very good, relatively light structure for making observatory roofs. And of course, you can see the observatory in its resting position now, rolled back onto the observatory itself. Keep the rain out. Here's the shipman poking up through the hole in the roof. And here the whole structure is painted. I added an actual concrete pier rather than that triangular table that was just sitting on some posts sunk in the ground that I took it up to Stellafane with. This is a 12-inch diameter concrete pier going down 3.5 feet in the ground, and a much bigger block of concrete around the bottom of it. Uh, the I have the C14 on it right now, or in this picture. That's the one that used to be at the Malpas Observatory. Now living at Observatory number 2. Here's the Schuppmann, permanently installed on an astrophysics mounting, which uh, um, I bought used. I really like the mounting, works very well, has no trouble slewing with that big lever arm of the 10-foot long telescope tube. I have used this telescope very extensively for planetary imaging. It's almost a perfect match for typical New Jersey seeing. I can regularly get diffraction limited images from this telescope in New Jersey. Some recent work I finished in 2021 on Observatory number 2. I had to replace the galvanized steel cables, which were starting to rust, with stainless steel cables. I might lose a head or something if they ever broke and snapped back from the spring tension. So feels a little bit safer with the stainless steel cables. I also replaced the rickety original steps with new treated wood steps. They were really falling apart, and those things that the cables are attached to about the level of the top step, I have also replaced those with 4-inch angle aluminum. A lot of stress from those cables were tearing those 4x4s apart, and I gave it a new paint job. Here's the conglomerate that I ended up with after about 25 years of work. Observatory number 1, which was completed in 1999. Observatory number 2, completed in 2003. Observatory number 3, completed in 2006, as was the office between Observatory number 1 and Observatory number 2. I added another office between Observatories number 1 and number 3, and the computer there serves both of the observatories. The only way to get into Observatory number 1 is through Observatory number 2. I had blocked that off completely. Unfortunately, my original observatory guard dog, Noah, died in 2012. So he's installed here to continue virtually guarding the observatory. And Boomer, my elderly German Shepherd that I adopted in 2013, he only lived another 3 years, and he's buried beside of Noah there. I added the railing and improved steps in 2021. The C14 now lives in Observatory number 2. A C11 Edge HD has replaced the Meade 10-inch LX50. A very good telescope. I did all my speckle interferometry of double stars with that telescope in that observatory. And the 7.25-inch Schuppmann is now living happily at Observatory number 3. And everything still works. Now, since Noah and Boomer have retired, I now have a new observatory guard dog. His name is Chewbacca, Chewy for short. He's not nearly as ferocious looking as the 2 German Shepherds, but he does a good job of protecting the observatory from all sorts of strange noises at night. Now, one more thing about my favorite activity in my observatory, and I will stop talking. What I do most often is called lucky imaging, as though I'm taking thousands of images in the hopes that the seeing will settle down in a few of them so I can capture diffraction limited images. Well, the only luck involved is just having a reasonably clear sky to observe, planets to see, and at least average seeing. Even a poor single exposure contains a lot of information. It's just obscured by noise and distortions caused by the atmosphere. If you simply get rid of most of the really bad images and combine and stack all of the reasonably good images, the information defining the actual image tends to add together and reinforce itself, and the noise and the distortion tends to cancel itself out. It's the power of imaging or of averaging that does it, not luck. The improvement in the signal to noise ratio goes as the square root of the number of reasonably good frames that you stack. Signal to noise ratio is proportional to the square root of n, the number of frames you stack. Now let me show you how this works using images of Jupiter I took a few weeks ago with the 7¼ inch Shukman. Now here is a single 4 millisecond exposure video frame of Jupiter. Now it's been debayered to recover the color. I take raw undebayered video when I do my imaging, so I don't lose the resolution. Now, if I sharpen it with the wavelet tools that are in Registax, this is about the best you can get out of it. But this is a single frame sharpened, and let's call the signal noise ratio, whatever it is, X. Now, if I stack about 60% of the frames in a 30-second video, this is the improvement I get from 1,591 frames. The square root of that is 40. So I got a 40-fold improvement in the signal to noise ratio compared to what a single frame gives me just by stacking those 1,591 frames, allowing the information to reinforce itself and the noise and distortions to cancel out. By the way, that's IO to the left of it. You can see it's resolved into a disk. Now, I imaged, only 30 seconds because Jupiter rotates so rapidly that it would be blurred if I took a lot more than 30 seconds worth of frames. So that night, I took 30 videos of 2,628 frames each, and I aligned and stacked the best 60% of those. And I derotated and stacked all 30 images together using a program called WinJupos. This gave me another roughly factor of 5 improvement of the signal noise ratio. So what you see here is what you get from processing roughly 45,000 reasonably good images. They're not super good things that I might hope to get from some kind of luck. This is from the power of averaging. And if we blow this thing up, you can see that it has done really quite well. We've resolved the vortex in the middle of the Great Red Spot. And here is the size of the airy disk for a 7¼ inch aperture. And you can see that there's little spots of little tiny dark storms on Jupiter that are the size of the airy disk or even smaller. But you can resolve things smaller than the airy disk if they're dark objects against a light background. Like I'm sure that you resolved telephone wires against the bright sky with a regular snap-it camera when it's smaller than the resolution limit of your camera. Anyhow, I can regularly get images like this from my observatory, and I doubt if I would have the patience to do this if I had to schlep it out of the house every time I wanted to set up and observe. So anyhow, that's all. And I'll take your questions now if you have some.
All right. Thank you so much, Cliff. So we do have a number of questions. Before we get to that, I do want to like I said, thank you for giving us another wonderful presentation, and thank you everyone for joining us. So, our first online question was, do you get in trouble from the carpeted room from the static uh, when it's cold?
I have never experienced that. That's probably because it's not dry inside the observatory. I mean, if I had a gas-fired heater in there and I had heated it up and lowered the humidity to the point that I might get static if I scooted my feet across the carpet.
Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle.
But once I open up the roof and let the night air in, there's so much humidity that you don't get any static sparks. At least I have never experienced them.
Yeah. So you also don't have the problem I do, where I come equipped with my own natural static generation of long hair.
No, hair is not a problem for me.
All right.
Remembering to wear a hat when I go to the observatory is my problem.
All right. So our next question is, what kind of permitting did you need for this project?
Well, as I said in the very beginning, the reason I made pole barns rather than permanent foundation buildings was because something that my neighbor who has the horses told me, that you're allowed to build pole barns on farms without having to get a building permit. So I don't know if that's really true, but I'm acting as though it's true. And please don't turn me in if it's not.
Oh, please. Let's face it, it's a lot easier to ask forgiveness than to ask for permission sometimes.
Well, I tell you, that doesn't always work out well. The church I go to built a kind of a shack on the back of the church that they called the annex, and they had the nursery Sunday school class in it for many years. And finally, East Brunswick building department found out about it. They made them tear it down. But anyhow, I hope I never have to tear my observatories down.
I hope not too, because that honestly looks quite fun. Our next question is, why didn't you make the pylon for the scope mount taller instead of making the wall removable?
Instead of making the wall removable, well, I learned where the axis of the polar axis of the mounting was pointing after I got the roof built. And it turns out that at the height that it is right now, the scope just barely fits under the roof when it's folded in place. And that's not that actually been a problem. I found that I actually get a better polar alignment using the drift method than I did using the polar axis telescope anyway. So, and besides that, my neighbor's trees have grown up to the point that they're obscuring the North Star. So I couldn't use it if I had to now.
Yeah, we acutely feel that pain. We have some sumac at the observatory that needs some looking after.
I'm encouraging my neighbor to borrow my chainsaw. In fact, I even volunteered that I would use it. And I'm hoping that lightning strikes the trees or something of that sort.
All right. So our next question is, they know white will help during the summer by not absorbing as much heat, but are there potential problems with light reflection off of the white surfaces of the observatories?
Well, the inside of the roof structure is just natural painted or natural unpainted wood. There's a little bit of the walls that are white, but I have not had any trouble because my telescopes themselves are are shielded from anything in the observatory. I have noticed a couple times that I get light leaks around some reverse Crayford focusers, but that's from the red safe lights that I have for seeing my way around in the observatory. But when that gets to be a problem, I just unscrew the bulbs and the problem goes away. A more serious problem was the light from the computer screen, and I used the Duvetine cloth curtains to deal with that problem. But reflection off the inside of the walls of the observatory is just not giving me a problem. And by the way, black painted walls are hard to work with. I mean, they tend to be invisible, and you can't see things when you need to see things.
True. Contrast is in fact important,
Yep.
as you were actually saying with your imaging. All right. So our next question is from Paul. He assumes the pole observatory is free from the pier, or the the center pole for the where you mount the telescope. Did you seal the gap with some sort of boot?
I have the outdoor carpeting just barely not touching the pier. So the carpeting provides the seal.
Cool. One of our viewers actually wanted to add in that a gas-fired heater would actually add humidity because propane burning releases water.
Well, that's true if it vented inside the observatory, but uh, actually any kind of heat or air conditioning inside of an observatory would be defeating the purposes of the observatory by making horrible local generated seeing,
True.
which makes for some pretty cold nights out there.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures and I've seen the little video snaps of some of the people who have images uh lately this year, and some of them are quite bundled up, although I think for this last week when there has been, they've chosen to stay inside because it is quite cold.
Yep.
All right, so our next question is there a way to make the Schumann telescope smaller, or is the size really dictated by the physical restraints of the angles of and the optics?
Well, the focal ratio can be reduced. In fact, the 13-inch Schumann at Cellophane and McGregor Observatory is f10. And Jim Daly built a super Schumann, which I invented back in 1964, which has all spherical surfaces and doesn't need to be figured. He made a 6-inch super Schumann, and that was the basis for the 13-inch that they built for McGregor Observatory. And of course, both of those were super Schumanns. But how much faster you can make it, I don't know. It turns out that you end up getting the same kind of problems that you get with all tilted element lenses, like the Schiefspiegler and the YOLO. You end up with a tilted focal plane, and you get some really funky high order aberrations start showing up. At f14, which my telescope is, and at f10, which the big scope up at Stellophane is, the off-axis aberrations are all small compared to the airy disk. So they're diffraction limited, at least down to f10. And by the way, I am convinced if Ludwig Schumann had invented his telescope another 50 years earlier, nobody would have wanted to build those old long tube refractors, because this thing is so much better performing than a conventional achromat that you would never want to go back to a regular achromat once you've experienced the image quality of a Schuppmann. There is zero chromatic aberration. I mean, it's got less chromatic aberration than the best apochromat that's ever been built.
All right. So I'm gonna ask that if anyone online does have questions, do get those in. Uh, but before we get back to questions, because there were a number of terms I know someone with a lesser knowledge of astronomy and astrophotography might be having trouble with. I've seen some of your presentations before, so I'm familiar with the term. But what do you mean by aberrations?
Distortions of the image, things like spherical aberration, where that not all of the rays from all over the mirror come to the same focal point, or chromatic aberration, where the green light has uh, a longer focal length than the red light and the blue light, and that puts rainbow fringes around your images. So spherical aberration would make it blurry. Chromatic aberration would make it all full of rainbows, and things like coma, which is another aberration, would make it fuzzy when it's off axis, but sharp in the middle. A regular paraboloidal telescope um, would have a nice sharp images in the center, but if you get far enough away from the axis, things get fuzzy and out of
So kind
focus.
of a
Uh,
vignette effect almost.
no, a vignetting effect is where that you have some kind of obstruction or aperture that's too small in your telescope, so that off-axis rays get cut off and can't contribute to the image. I mean, there's all kind of troubles you can get in optically, and vignetting is one of them. People have a lot of trouble with vignetting in uh, Cassegrain telescopes and Schmidt Cassegrains if they don't do the baffling properly. But a lot of details you got to worry about. What happened? Where did Kim go? I'm going to temporarily put my slideshow away. Oh, I see she's not there. Yeah, well, there she is. She's back.
Trying to get back on stream. So can everyone hear me now?
Hmm. Hear you just fine.
Perfect. So, well, let's see. Our next question was, uh, can you get from one observatory to all the others without ever stepping outside?
I can get from observatory number 3 to observatory number 1 without stepping outside. But to get from either one of them to observatory number 2, I've got to go outside.
Uh, and Paul adds on to that question of when will you complete the tunnel project between all three observatories in your basement?
Well, the closest thing to a tunnel that I have is a 2-inch vinyl pipe that I'm running cables from one observatory to the other one. I've got a 300-foot uh, uh, Ethernet cable and power cables going under only about 6 inches under the ground from my house back to the observatory. And the cool thing is that I can log onto the computers in the observatory from up at the house, and it's very convenient for the couple of hours work that I have to spend processing my images. After an hour or so of observing, I can close up the observatory, go back up to the house, and process my images in the comfort of my living room.
That honestly sounds a lot better than freezing your butt off or getting eaten to death by mosquitoes in the summer.
Well, my buddy Mark teases me that he can operate his telescopes in his pajamas in the middle of the winter because he's got all of his controls, including opening up the slit in his observatory dome from his basement. So I can't do that. I got to put clothes on and go outside.
Is that an eventual on the to-do list to make the observatories more remote?
I would like to be able to do some of the operation of the telescopes from up at the house. And I have a very good chance of doing that because the Gemini system that runs the Losmandy mounting has a, a, a networkable controller that I can operate from up at the house. And I believe I will be able to operate the astrophysics mount the same way, but I haven't got that working just yet. I'm pretty close to having the Gemini system that will move the C14 around, but I got to go down there and pull on those ropes and close the roof up and latch the suitcase clamps or roll the observatory number 3 roof back over it and latch it so the winds don't blow it away. So still got to do that. And I cannot imagine a system where I can automatically do all of that remotely.
You mean you can't
Maybe
just do a garage door opener where it does the winches?
I might be able to fix the roll off that way. And it's possible, but life is short. I mean, I'm 85 right now, and I don't think I've got enough years left for a project like that. I figure I'm going to spend my time using my telescopes.
Hey, uh, we all have priorities, and honestly, you are in the right place. So, like I said, guys, if you have any last minute questions, do get those in. I want to thank you all for coming and out and supporting us. Do hit those like and subscribe buttons on our YouTube, on our Twitch. It lets us know we're doing a really good job and also gets the channel out to other people who may be interested in astronomy and other science topics. Uh, we have many people, just like Cliff, who love to offer their insight onto many topics like this and more. And if you ever miss a broadcast, you can always hit up our YouTube archive where we have all of the presentations. And if you have any questions on those, do ask those um, in the comment section. I do peruse those fairly regularly to try and make sure any questions you may have are answered. You can also check out our website, uacnj.org. Again, that's where you'll find links to all of our socials. You'll find links to all of our member clubs, and as well as our upcoming talks and events. So it looks like our questions have come to a close. I want to thank you, Cliff, for another great presentation. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.